Bayer, the remedy of war, profits, and experiments in the Nazi economy. You are on War Profits, where we uncover the serious, darkest, and most profitable stories of World War II corporations. Picture this: a white laboratory coat, clean hands, the scent of antiseptic masking fearful something far more sinister. In the heart of Auschwitz, a doctor approaches a prisoner with a syringe, not to heal, not to cure, but to test. The label on the vial reads simply, "Bayer." When we think of the Second World War, we imagine tanks rolling through Europe, bombers darkening the skies, soldiers dying in trenches. But there was another war being waged, a silent, profitable war, fought not with bullets, but with balance sheets. Behind the front lines, corporations transformed human suffering into quarterly earnings. And among them stood a giant of German industry, a name synonymous with healing, with aspirin, with modern medicine itself: Bayer. But what if I told you that the same company that promised to cure your headache was conducting experiments on prisoners who had no choice, no voice, no escape? What if the remedy they sold to the world was perfected through methods so horrifying that even the Nuremberg judges struggled to comprehend them? This is not a story about evil scientists working in isolation. This is a story about industrial capitalism meeting totalitarian ideology, about boardroom decisions that sentenced thousands to agony, about disgusted, aggressive profits extracted from the very marrow of human bones. This is the story of how serious, melancholic Bayer, the remedy, became the poison. Long before the swastika flew over Berlin, before the world knew the name Adolf Hitler, there was a young chemist named Friedrich Bayer. In 1863, in the small town of Barmen, Germany, he founded a dye company. Just dyes, colors for fabrics. Nothing sinister, nothing world-changing. But Friedrich understood something fundamental. Chemistry was the future. His partner, Johann Friedrich Westcott, shared this vision. Together, they built a modest factory along the Wooker River, where the water ran clean and the coal was cheap. They called it Frieder Bayer et Comp. The early years were unremarkable. Aniline dyes for the textile industry, competing with British and French rivals, scraping by in a crowded market. But then came the breakthrough. In 1897, a Bayer chemist named Felix Hoffmann synthesized a compound that would change everything: acetyl salicylic acid. We know it as aspirin. It was a miracle. A painkiller that actually worked, that didn't cause the stomach bleeding of salicylic acid, that could be mass-produced cheaply. Bayer patented it, marketed it, sold it to a world desperate for relief from pain. Within a decade, aspirin made Bayer a household name. The company expanded rapidly, building factories across Germany, establishing subsidiaries in the United States, Russia, China. By the time the First World War erupted, Bayer was no longer just a dye company. It was a confident, energetic pharmaceutical empire, a chemical powerhouse, a symbol of German scientific superiority. But empires have a way of bending to the winds of history. And when Germany lost the Great War, Bayer lost something too: its American assets, seized by the United States government as enemy property. The Treaty of Versailles stripped away patents, forced reparations, humiliated the nation.
Bayer, like Germany itself, was angry, desperate, wounded, resentful, hungry for redemption. The Weimar years were nervous chaos. Hyperinflation devoured savings. Political extremism flourished. And in this instability, German industry made a fateful decision: consolidation. In 1925, Bayer merged with 5 other chemical giants: BASF, Host, Agfa, Griesheim Elektron, and Weiler Thermir, to form IG Farben, Interessengemeinschaft Farbenindustrie AG, the community of interests of dye industries. It was the largest chemical conglomerate in the world, a fearful, corporate leviathan controlling everything from pharmaceuticals to explosives, from synthetic rubber to poison gas. And Bayer was its crown jewel, its pharmaceutical division, its respectable face. But respectability has a price. And IG Farben was willing to pay it, in ways the world would soon discover. When Adolf Hitler seized power in 1933, German industry faced a choice: resist or collaborate. For IG Farben, there was no choice at all. The Nazis promised rearmament, expansion, autarky, a self-sufficient Germany that would never again be strangled by foreign blockades. And IG Farben had exactly what Hitler needed: synthetic fuel, synthetic rubber, chemicals for warfare. The courtship was mutual. Hitler needed industry. Industry needed Hitler. Within months of the Nazi takeover, IG Farben executives were meeting with government officials, signing contracts, pledging loyalty. Karl Bosch, the company's chairman and a Nobel laureate, initially resisted. He despised the Nazis, warned against their racial policies, their reckless militarism. But Bosch was sidelined, replaced by more compliant leaders. Men like Hermann Schmitz, who understood that survival meant submission. By 1936, IG Farben was deeply embedded in the Nazi war machine. The company built massive factories to produce synthetic gasoline through the Burgius process, enabling Germany to wage war without oil imports. It developed Buna, synthetic rubber, essential for tires, hoses, seals. It manufactured Zyklon B, a pesticide that would later be repurposed for disgusted, fearful mass murder in the gas chambers. And Bayer? Bayer kept making medicine: aspirin, sulfa drugs, painkillers, antibiotics. But now those medicines served a sarcastic, disgusted dual purpose: healing German soldiers while the company's parent conglomerate fueled the machinery of conquest. But there was a problem, a labor problem. As Germany expanded into Austria, Czechoslovakia, Poland, France, the Soviet Union, the demand for industrial production skyrocketed. German men were drafted into the Wehrmacht. Factories faced shortages. And so the Nazis offered a solution: forced labor, prisoners of war, concentration camp inmates, slave workers. Forced. IG Farben accepted, eagerly. In 1941, the company made a decision that would define its legacy. It would build a new factory complex in occupied Poland near the town of Woszencim. The Germans called it Auschwitz. The factory would produce Buna rubber, essential for the war effort, and it would be staffed by prisoners from the nearby concentration camp. IG Farben invested 900 million Reichsmarks, roughly $3 billion in today's money. It was the largest private investment in Nazi Germany, and it was built on the backs of the condemned. The factory was called Monowitz, or Auschwitz III. Tens of thousands of prisoners were marched from the main camp each day to work 12-hour shifts in brutal conditions. They mixed chemicals, hauled materials, operated machinery. They were disgusted, beaten for moving too slowly, starved to increase productivity, worked until they collapsed. If this corporate greed, disgusted, serious, disturbs you, hit like to support our dives into historical archives and comment what you would do in such a dilemma. The average life expectancy of a worker at Monowitz was 3 months. When prisoners became too weak to work, they were sent back to Auschwitz-Birkenau for fearful, disgusted extermination. The factory never produced a single pound of usable rubber. But IG Farben didn't care. The investment wasn't just about rubber, it was about control. About proximity to disgusted, sarcastic, cheap, expendable labor. About embedding itself so deeply into the Nazi economy that it became indispensable. And Bear? Bear was watching, learning, mysterious, fearful, preparing its own experiments. In the sterile laboratories of Auschwitz, far from the smokestacks and gas chambers, Bear doctors conducted research. They called it pharmaceutical testing. The prisoners called it torture. Dr. Helmut Vetter was one of them, an IG Farben employee, a Bayer representative, a man who saw prisoners not as human beings, but as test subjects. He injected them with experimental drugs, painkillers, antibiotics, sedatives to observe the effects. No consent, no anesthesia, no mercy. One prisoner, a Polish woman named Wanda, later testified, "They injected us with substances we did not know." Some of us developed fevers, convulsions, paralysis. Some died within hours. The doctors took notes. They never spoke to us. We were desperate numbers. Bayer paid the SS for access to prisoners, 470 Reichsmarks per subject. Cheaper than laboratory animals, more expendable. The experiments weren't limited to Auschwitz. At Buchenwald, Bayer tested vaccines on prisoners, deliberately infecting them with typhus to measure the efficacy of new treatments. At Dachau, they studied the effects of hypothermia, immersing prisoners in ice water to see how long they could survive. The data was meticulous, the suffering immeasurable. And what did Bayer gain? Patents, profits, prestige. After the war, some of those experiments formed the basis for post-war pharmaceutical developments. The knowledge was tainted, blood-soaked, but it was used nonetheless. On War Profits, we tell the serious, confident, real story without filters. Where are you watching from? Share with someone who, hopeful, energetic, needs to know these secrets. But let's be clear, Bayer was not acting alone. IG Farben's was a hydra, a multi-headed beast with divisions for every aspect of the Nazi economy. The pharmaceutical division, Bayer, was just one tentacle, but it was a willing tentacle, an active participant, a profiteer. By 1944, as the Allies closed in, IG Farben's profits had soared. Despite the war, despite the bombings, despite the collapsing front lines, the company reported record earnings. Bayer's pharmaceutical sales alone exceeded 100 million Reichsmarks. The disgusted remedy business was booming. But serious? The remedy was poison, and the world was about to find out. When the Red Army liberated Auschwitz in January 1945, they found the remnants of Monowitz. Skeletal prisoners, abandoned machinery, documents detailing the collaboration between IG Farben and the SS. The evidence was undeniable. As the Allies occupied Germany, they began investigating German industry's role in the Holocaust. IG Farben was at the top of the list. In 1947, 24 IG Farben executives were indicted at Nuremberg in what became known as the IG Farben trial, or the Industrialists' trial. The charges were surprised, disgusting, planning and waging aggressive war, plundering occupied territories, enslaving civilians, and committing crimes against humanity through the use of forced labor and medical experiments. The prosecution presented mountains of evidence. Contracts with the SS, payment receipts for prisoners, testimonies from survivors, internal memos discussing the procurement of experimental subjects. One memo, written by an IG Farben executive, read, "The experiments were conducted with the approval of the company. The subjects were provided by the concentration camp administration. Compensation was paid per head." The defense argued that the executives were merely businessmen, that they had no direct involvement in the atrocities, that they were following orders, that they were victims of circumstance. It was the Nuremberg defense, the same excuse used by Nazi officers. We were just doing our jobs. The judges were unconvinced. In 1948, 13 of the 24 defendants were found guilty. Sentences ranged from 18 months to 8 years. Not one received a death sentence. Not one served more than a decade in prison. Hermann Schmitz, the chairman of IG Farben, was acquitted. Karl Crouch, the head of the supervisory board, received 6 years. Fritz Termeer, a board member who oversaw Monowitz, received 7 years. He was released in 1951. And what happened to IG Farben? The Allies ordered its dissolution. The conglomerate was broken up into its original components: BASF, Hoechst, Agfa, and Bayer. Each became an independent company again. Each rebuilt. Each thrived. Bayer emerged from the ruins with its relatively intact. Yes, there had been a trial. Yes, there had been convictions. But the world needed medicine. The world needed aspirin, and Bayer had aspirin. By the 1960s, Bayer was once again a global pharmaceutical giant. It developed new drugs, expanded into agrochemicals, acquired companies worldwide. The past was rarely mentioned. The experiments were forgotten. The prisoners were buried in unmarked graves. Fritz Termeer, the man who oversaw Auschwitz III, became the chairman of Bayer's supervisory board in 1956. He served until 1964, celebrated as a leader of German industry's post-war recovery. The irony is suffocating. The man who paid the SS for human test subjects was now leading the company that marketed itself as a healer, a savior, a force for good. Today, Bayer is one of the largest pharmaceutical and life sciences companies in the world. It employs over 100,000 people. It generates serious annual revenues exceeding 40 billion euros. It produces everything from aspirin to cancer treatments, from pesticides to genetically modified seeds. Walk into any pharmacy and you'll see the Bayer cross, a simple, clean logo that promises relief, health, innovation.
There is no mention of Auschwitz on the packaging, no footnote about forced labor, no asterisk explaining that some of the company's early research was conducted on prisoners who had no choice. In 2001, Bayer joined other German companies in contributing to a compensation fund for former forced laborers. The company paid its share, relatively modest compared to its profits, and issued carefully worded statements expressing regret. Not guilt, regret. The word choice matters. Regret implies misfortune, an unfortunate chapter, a lamentable circumstance. Guilt implies responsibility, complicity, moral failure. Bayer chose regret. But history does not forget. Survivors do not forget. In 2016, a group of Polish survivors filed a lawsuit against Bayer, demanding further reparations and a formal acknowledgement of the company's role in their suffering. The case was dismissed on procedural grounds. The survivors, now in their 90s, received nothing. Historians continue to uncover documents to piece together the full extent of Bayer's collaboration with the Nazi regime. Books have been written, documentaries produced, memorials erected. But the company itself remains angry, disgusted, largely silent, its official history carefully sanitized, its past rebranded as a cautionary tale rather than a corporate crime. And perhaps that is the disgusted, most disturbing part of this story. Not that Bayer collaborated with the Nazis, many companies did. Not that it profited from slave labor, capitalism has always found ways to exploit the vulnerable. But that it, angry, disgusted, survived, that it thrived, that it transformed its blood-soaked legacy into a symbol of healing. The war ended, but disgusted, the profit never stopped. So what do we take from this? What lesson can we extract from the sad, melancholy ashes of Auschwitz, from the ledgers of IG Farben, from the syringes of Bayer's doctors? Perhaps it is this, that evil is not always dramatic. It does not always arrive in jackboots and swastikas. Sometimes it arrives in a white coat, with a briefcase, with a contract. Sometimes it speaks the language of efficiency, of innovation, of progress. Sometimes it hides behind logos and slogans and quarterly reports. Bayer did not set out to become a symbol of corporate complicity and genocide. It set out to make money. And in the process, it made choices. Choices to collaborate, to exploit, to experiment, to prioritize profit over humanity. Those choices had consequences. Tens of thousands of lives lost, countless more scarred, a legacy stained. But here is the uncomfortable truth. Bayer is not unique. It is a case study in how capitalism can be weaponized, how industry can serve ideology, how the pursuit of profit can justify the unthinkable. The same dynamics that enabled Bayer to thrive under the Nazis continue to operate today, in sweatshops, in conflict zones, in boardrooms where decisions are made without regard for the human cost. We like to believe that we have learned from history, that the horrors of the past could never be repeated. But history does not repeat itself because we forget. It repeats itself because we choose to ignore the patterns, to prioritize convenience over conscience, to accept the sanitized version of events rather than confront the uncomfortable truth. Bayer's aspirin still works, its drugs still save lives, but melancholic,
mysterious. Every pill carries a ghost, every patent a shadow. And until we reckon with that shadow, until we demand accountability, transparency, and justice, we are complicit in the silence. If this story surprised you, shook you, if it made you question the brands you trust, the companies you support,
The systems we accept without question, then do something. Hit like, share this video, comment your thoughts, subscribe to War Prophets, where we dig into the stories that history tries to bury. Because the remedy is not forgetting. The remedy is remembering. The remedy is truth.